So my guest this morning is a guest who is not a stranger to the Reading Circle microphones. As a matter of fact, when the show first started back in 2001, this young man was one of my first guests sometime during either 2002, 2003, 2004, somewhere around there. It was in the early years of the show. This young man was my guest. Then he came back on. He reappeared some years later, and now some years have gone by again. And he is back because he continues to, as that song say, he's continuing to move on in God's name. And there's none other than Kevin Wayne Johnson. He is the founder and chief executive officer of the Johnson Leadership Group, LLC. He has taken up the task of developing individual and organizational operating excellence as his life's purpose, plans, and through intentional living. He coaches in order to coax audiences to live out their gifts and dreams. Johnson is a best-selling author of 8 books and the contributing author to an additional 7 books on the topics of faith, leadership, blended families, finance, writing, and global book marketing, all since 2001. As a current radio and television co-host, his books have earned some 19 literary awards. Gayle King, an editor-at-large for the Oprah magazine, praised his work, writing to him that your book, Kevin, touched me, quote unquote. In September 2019, he penned the Amazon.com bestseller, 2 categories, titled Leadership with a Servant's Heart, Leading Through Personal Relationships. The book has earned 8 literary awards in 2020 and 2021. An independent, internationally certified coach, teacher, mentor, and speaker with the nationally recognized John Maxwell Team, Johnson leads learning experiences that are tailored to meet the specific needs of the audience to help maximize efficiency, growth, awareness, and effectiveness. Johnson successfully completed a 34-year career in government and private industry, retired late 2017 as a middle to senior level leader in various and diverse positions of increased responsibility. A native of Richmond, Virginia, Johnson earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and Management Economics Finance from Virginia Commonwealth University and completed coursework towards an MBA at Marymount University, Arlington, Virginia, and University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. He is an ordained Church of God Ministries Incorporated minister and has held numerous leadership positions at the local, regional, national, and international levels. Johnson serves as the Faith Community Commissioner on the Maryland Governor Commission for Suicide Prevention, a 4-year term beginning January 2019. He also serves on the National Board of Directors with Nexus Family Healing, Plymouth, Minneapolis, since 2018, the Pinnacle Forum, Scottsdale, Arizona, and finally, Sable Asset Coin Corporation, Palm Springs, Florida. The last 2 appointments came in 2021. He lives in Clarksville, Maryland, with his wife, Gayle, of 28 years, and 3 sons, Kevin, Christopher, and Cameron. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Reading Circle microphones, none other than Kevin Wayne Johnson. Kevin, good morning.
Mark, listen, I didn't know you were going to read all of that.
Well, brother, let me tell you.
If I had known, I would have just given you a couple of sentences.
Well, let me tell you why I do that. I do that, and many of my guests say that, but I do that on purpose and intentionally, because there might be someone in the listening audience that will say, you know what, if God can do that for Kevin, God can do that for me. And you know what, if Kevin can do all that, then I know I can get up and do something. So that's why I like to read the entire bios. I mean, unless they're like 4, 5, 6, 7 pages long, but I mean.
Well, that's good, man. That's good, because the overarching message is exactly what you just said. Each and every one of us are a vessel for our Heavenly Father, but it's up to us to allow Him to use us. Just walk in His will, be very intentional and deliberate about what that call might be, because everybody doesn't stand in the pulpit and have a microphone.
Correct.
But there's definitely something that every one of us are called to do, because we are created with purpose, and God does have a plan. The key is to find out what that plan is, and then once you do, walk in it and just be a blessing to others, because that's why we're blessed, to be a blessing to others. So thank you for sharing. I didn't quite know why you were reading it all, but now I understand, so I'm with you. I get it.
Yeah, my hope is always for it to be inspiration and encouragement for somebody that's, again, because it's like there are folks that want to do things and they're either procrastinating or either don't believe in themselves enough or whatever. But when they hear about something happening for somebody else, that might be the spark they need to say, well, you know what? I think I am going to give it a shot. That if this brother can do all that and God has done all this for this brother, then you know what? I'm going to get out there and throw my hat in the ring too.
Yep, absolutely. You said it well.
So I tell you, man, we've come a long way and it's interesting that I saw it was 2001 because like I said, I do remember you were one of my first guests when I started doing guests on the Reading Circle, and the show started in 2001. I don't think you were 2001, but I think you were real close, either 2002 or 2003, one or the other. But I remember when we met, as a matter of fact, at that time you were living in Hillsborough, New Jersey.
Absolutely. I was about to say I was in the Garden State for about 6.5 years. And I became a fan of your show, and I still am. I'm back in Maryland now. I say back in Maryland because we matriculated from Maryland to New Jersey. And then Gail, my wife, her job brought us back. You mentioned that I was 34 years with the federal government. I spent some time in the financial district and also Midtown Manhattan. That's what led us to New Jersey. And then my wife worked for AT&T. And at that time, the world headquarters was in Basking Ridge.
That's correct.
So she got some really, really good exposure there and visibility, received a promotion, and then her job led us back to the state of Maryland. And we just picked up where we left off. You know, we found a good Bible-believing, Bible-teaching church, got involved with ministry. We were deacons in the local church in New Jersey.
Right.
Back here, and ultimately got involved with a great local church that was growing and thriving under a young pastor, and ultimately became an associate pastor of that church. And then beyond that, the next step was to become a senior pastor of a local church. So again, when we raise our hand and say yes to whatever that assignment might be, God always provides, and we just need to be open and receptive and be that vessel that he wants us to be so that we can make him clear and visible in the earth. But equally important, just make this world a much better place. This world needs hope.
Yes, it does.
They're not going to get it if you and I don't step up and provide that hope that people need and what they're looking for.
I know that's right. And that's interesting. I didn't, maybe we did say this the last time. We probably didn't. I just didn't remember. But actually, I was down in Basking Ridge at AT&T for like 15 years, from 1985 to 2000. I was down in Basking Ridge. I worked with AT&T. That was before I went into education. So our paths may have, I don't know if she was down there during those same years or not, but our paths may or may not have crossed. I don't know.
Yeah, she was in HR, so she was there. We arrived in 1997, and we stayed until 2003. Yeah, so you were both there at the same time.
We were there because I was there until 2000, and so you're right. AT&T was headquartered in Basking Ridge, and I had many offices between Basking Ridge and Short Hills and Morristown, and I was just like over that 15-year career there. Had offices in multiple locations in that New Jersey because AT&T owns like that entire section of New Jersey. And it was interesting what you were just saying about us, life. For us trying to make life or being the vessel to make life better for others. We are both of us believe firmly in that. I know my pastor and my church, that is like kind of like our mantra is like we can, not necessarily that so much we be a blessing, but if we are a blessing, then we need to be a blessing to somebody else. We ought to be making life better for others. And there's a quote I posted on Instagram the other day, as well as my other social media, was from Bob Marley. And he said, the people who were trying to make this world worse are not taking the day off. Why should I? Mm-hmm. And that immediately, when I saw that, it struck with me. It stuck me because it was like, exactly. It's like, well, the folks who are making it bad aren't taking the day off. So why those of us who are trying to make a difference and spread hope, love, and joy, why should we take one?
Absolutely. That's a great question. It's one of those, what I call an introspective type question, right? What can I do to make the world a much better place? And that's what finds us traveling the different roads that we've traveled, because even as you was reading the bio, I've done a lot of different things, but I do a lot of different things in terms of being able to touch and reach different audiences based upon the gifts that God has given us. And so it's just really a matter of just saying yes and going forward. And I always tell people wherever I go that we have a responsibility, I believe, to do what we can to help people. And help people means meeting them at their area of need, but you'll never find out what it is unless you have a conversation with them. The
Correct.
Conversation is what sparks what somebody might be internalizing. And then once they start to talk and they feel comfortable, they feel open, they begin to trust you, they know whatever they say will be held in confidence. Now they're on the process of starting to heal because they have somebody that they can talk to. People are walking around, Mark, every day around us, internalizing pain.
Correct.
Internalizing stress, internalizing different situations and circumstances in their lives. But as soon as they get an opportunity to talk to somebody about it, and
I know that's right.
it out, that begins the healing process. And now that person can now go to another person and have a conversation and help them to heal. So that's really what life is all about. We're only here for a very short period of time. It's not about us. It's about those that we are here to serve. Starts in the family, then it stretches out into the community, then it goes into the workplace and all of our civic and social organizations that we're a part of. And that's everything that we are doing, and everything that we are about is about helping and uplifting and building up other people.
No, you're absolutely right, because, again, very similar. Just about everything that I do deals with relationships and communications, whether it's when I'm principaling the school, whether I'm sitting behind this microphone on the radio show, whether I'm doing what I'm doing in my church, or whether I'm doing whatever I'm in. It really kind of does boil down to relationships and communication. And you're right. You're absolutely right in terms of what you were just saying about folks internalizing and walking around with a lot of pain, and just the opportunity to talk with somebody. I'm reading a book by Desmond Tutu, by Bishop Desmond Tutu now, about forgiving, the book of forgiving. And that's what he says in that folks got to be able to tell their story. That that whatever you're dealing with, whatever pain or whatever it is that you're going through, you've got to be able to name it, and you've got to be able to tell your story. And the book is written by Desmond Tutu and his daughter, Info. It's M-P-H-O, so I don't know how he says it. It's Info. I guess that's how it's saying, but it's Desmond Tutu and Info Tutu, the Book of Forgiving. And exactly what you were just saying about that ability to talk with somebody will begin the healing process. So you're absolutely right. And I'm going to go backwards before I go forwards in terms of my questioning with you, because we're talking about relationships, and your latest book was Leadership with a Servant's Heart, Leading Through Personal Relationships. And I actually downloaded the book. I actually have the book in my Kindle, and it's Leadership with a Servant's Heart, Leading in Your Workplace. And I see in the bio it was Leading Through Personal Relationships. But I'll tell you, before we go there, talk to me a little bit about, because I remember when you were taking, if I recall, you were taking the John Maxwell course, and now you've branched out and you have your own group. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as you go through life, you kind of discover some new gifts, some new talents, some new burdens, some new desires, and new opportunities. And Kevin Johnson is no different than everybody there in your listening audience. I was matriculating toward the latter part of my career toward this topic of leadership, because leadership is so crucially important in all facets of life. It's important in the family. It's important in terms of how the country is run. It's important in the workplace, in the church, in our academic institutions, throughout nonprofits, throughout corporations, and in government, city, county, state, and federal. And I paid close attention to it, and I was starting to become a student of it. Didn't quite understand, Mark, why at the time, but I had followed John Maxwell as a young pastor in his 20s when he was pastoring a church in Indiana, one of the fastest growing churches in America, this young pastor in his 20s. And I was watching how he was able to lead that congregation and always be open about being a man of faith, no matter who he's in front of, heads of state, Capitol Hill, wherever he is, he's never hesitant to let people know that he's a man of faith. And I sort of watched him, and I read his books, I listened to his speeches, took some of his courses. And then about 11 years ago, he opened it up for the general public to say, you know what, we're going to offer credentialing. We're going to offer certifications relative to what I've written, what I've spoke on, because he's trained millions around the world. And I was just really attracted to his business acumen, as well as the fact that he uses scripture throughout all that he does, and he doesn't hesitate to let people know that he's a man of faith. And I said, you know, that's something that I want to take a look at, because I'm never, ever, ever shy, hesitant, or ashamed to let people in any audience know that I'm a man of God. And what I'm talking to you comes from scripture. And so there's not very many people out here on the circuit that do that. There may be 3 or 4. Maxwell is one. But I've noticed that most of the men and women out here who are relatively well-known, have a national name, some have an international presence, the way that they present leadership strategies and principles, they leave people to believe that they came up with those principles. And they didn't. It all comes from Scripture. And so I got involved with the Maxwell program. First of all, I thought it was very affordable at the time. This is many, many years ago. In exchange for all of the information I'm getting, the constant mentoring, the constant phone calls, the constant check-in, all of the material that's available by being a certified member. And that's really helped me in my journey. It really has. It helps me to grow and to share. And without copying or emulating or even mirroring, you take the content and the curriculum and you mold it and you shape it so that you would be the person that presents it. And so the customers and clients and the men and women and even boys and girls that I now share these principles with is coming from the perspective of Kevin Johnson. So the Johnson Leadership Group, LLC, was established after my retirement from the government 34 years with that in mind, in addition to additional content and curriculum that we have developed that meets the needs of the customers and clients that we're serving. But the Maxwell content, it is the background. It is the foundation of what we do. It's a Christian organization. We pray together, and we're not ashamed of it. We have some of the best and brightest leaders and faculty in the country that are part of that, not just here in this country, but around the world, because the one of the main guys that teaches us on how to be better public speakers, he's actually based in the UK, and he spends a lot of time here in the U.S. So that's a little background on how I got started and why I got started, and it's just been tremendous, man. I mean, wow. In some circles, you just get instant credibility by being connected to him. But believe it or not, there's some people that I work with that I actually have never heard of him, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
We present our material as if it's ours, but we always have that logo, somewhere in the background. So that's a little bit of a journey in terms of how I connected with him, being a man of faith, and me being a man of faith, being all about leadership, me being all about leadership, him having already reached over 25 million people, 152 countries around the world, me with the goal of reaching 1 million people by 2025, and being available and being accessible in no fewer than 10 nations. We're already in 4. And so these are the goals that we have to have, because we walk by faith and not by sight. But then again, if you don't put it to action, then your faith is dead. So that's a little background on who we are and what we're doing and why we're connected with John Maxwell.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I love it. I absolutely love what it's all about, because I read the bio, and, like I said, I've known you prior to you even starting that. So the fact that you've gotten that far, praise God, thank God. And I hear you. Ain't no need, as they can say out there on the street, ain't no shame in the game. Ain't no shame in the game in terms of praying, and in terms of being a man of faith. No shame in the game. I mean, because I think a lot of people get confused with, when you say man of faith or man of God or woman of God, I think they get confused with perfection. That's not what we're saying. Right. But what we are saying is we do know who holds us, and we do know who holds the future. And as you were just saying, in terms of having the faith, you're right. Faith without works is dead. So you got to have the faith and you have to have the work. And you are putting those two things together. And that's why it is working. So I tell you, I'm looking here at the book. It says, leaders are learners. Never allow your thirst to be quenched, nor your hunger to be satisfied as it relates to lifelong learning. The more we grow through learning, the better equipped we are to pour into the lives of others. We were all created to serve, learn, and grow. When we do, we are walking in alignment with God's purpose. It is always more important to be prepared and not have an opportunity than it is to have an opportunity and not be prepared. I know that's right. The direct result of having the will to learn is a prepared servant with a servant's heart. In other words, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. But that is exactly where it is. As a matter of fact, it's interesting that we're talking about leadership, and we were talking about earlier in terms of it almost seems like, it just seems like there's no hope, that there has to be those of us that's a light, that's trying to be a light at least, to offer folks hope. In terms of leaders, and I'm not going to get into necessarily the political piece, but we just had the State of the Union the other night. I did not watch it. However, on social media, I've seen all of the shenanigans and nonsense that was going on. Where have we come in terms of leadership, in terms of our folks who are our elected officials? I mean, these are folks that we've elected that are acting worse than children. What are your thoughts on that in terms of leadership?
Well, that's probably one of the easiest questions you'll ever ask me, Mark. It comes down to one word, and it's a word that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but it comes down to accountability. Two things happen when we hold people accountable, because accountability can be very positive, and here's what I mean. When you have people on your team, people within your sphere of influence, who are doing really, really well and who are high performers, they're producing at a high level, they're cordial, they're professional, they're diplomatic and tactful, they take instructions. We hold them accountable by thanking them and telling them that we appreciate them and that we value them on the team, because we never want anybody to feel like we're taking them for granted. We're holding them accountable. We're keeping them inspired and motivated to continue to do the great work you're doing. Likewise, we have people on our team, people within our sphere of influence, who are not quite carrying their pail of water. They're not quite tapping into their potential. They're off course. They might be rude, divisive, sarcastic. They might be unwilling to follow instructions. They might be the type of people that are disruptive. We see that on Capitol Hill. We witnessed that during the 46th President's State of the Union address on Tuesday evening. What happens is, Mark, when those people are not held accountable, to them, it's a green light to continue that same behavior, that same mannerism, and that same attitude. And until and unless some folks are bold enough and courageous enough to stand up and say, no more, that's not appropriate, you're not representing your constituents that voted you to be here, or in any other circle, not just on Capitol Hill, but anywhere you go, any organization where you find yourself, if that person is not being held accountable, to them, it's just a green light to continue. And that's the issue that we're having right now, Mark, not just in Capitol Hill, but I see it prevalent throughout organizations where, for whatever reason, folks who should be holding people accountable aren't doing it. I don't know what the bottom line issue is, if it's fear, if it's retaliation, if it's some type of retribution. I'm not quite sure. But that's the key right there, accountability. It goes both ways. I tell people all the time, when you're surrounded by really, really good people who are doing really, really good work, you hold them accountable by letting them know how much you appreciate them, and you thank them, and you tell them that they're a valuable contribution to the team. Likewise, those that choose not to, you hold them accountable, and you give them some really, really good counsel and some really, really good advice and mentoring on how to turn that around and why, because if you don't, they're just going to continue that behavior. So that's the answer. I get that question a lot, and it's accountability. A lot of people are a little hesitant because they think it might lead to conflict, but you have to stand up because you don't want that disease and that poison to infiltrate the entire institution. And see, right now, because the Speaker of the House will not hold members of his own party accountable, he can't because of the compromise he had to make. All it takes is one person to stand up and say, okay, I want the Speaker of the House out of here. He had to compromise in order to be voted to be the Speaker of the House. So it's not going to come from him. So
Correct.
The question is, who else is going to stand up there in the Republican Party and advise their constituents that this is not appropriate. We don't want to do that. It makes us look really, really bad. I don't see any accountability happening, so it's going to continue, unfortunately.
No, you're absolutely right. And you're right. It's not just on that level, but the sad part is because it is at that level, the lower levels now follow suit. So what I say that is I even see it in the school. One day I had a situation where I was out. I was out of the building. I had to leave to go to a meeting, and I had another one of my teachers who was the in charge. And this particular parent came in on that day and just went wild. And so when I came back and I found out about it, in terms of the accountability, I had to write her a nice letter, and she was not happy when she got that letter and this, that, and the other. I said, but you can't come in here doing that. You would not do that in any other. You could not go to your nail salon and do that. You could not go to your doctor's office or your lawyer's office. You could not go anywhere and do what you thought you could do coming into this building. So, we literally had to put parameters in terms of when you come in this building, this is the protocol you will follow. And once we talked about it, once she got the letter and she read it and everything, and we went back through it, and I said, now look, because the young lady was younger than me, I said, look, I'm not talking to you principal parent now. I'm talking to you like as if I was your father and you are my daughter. Let me be clear. You are not going to be able to get your message across with that kind of activity. She said, you mean to tell me they're not hearing me because of my delivery? I said, exactly. Exactly. Now, after we had that conversation, we were able, like you said, the counseling and the so forth and so on. But my point is, what we're seeing on Capitol Hill and what we're seeing in Washington is the same thing that's now infiltrating down into other organizations, may they be schools or businesses or what have you. And I agree with you 100%. Until folks are held accountable, they do think, oh, well, you know what? I can do this every time I come in here. I would pretty much bet that this young lady won't come in there sounding off in the school like that again, but I don't know. But she can't say she hasn't been told. And I agree with you in terms on Capitol Hill. But let me see. I'm going to make sure if I get her initials correctly here. MTG. Yes, MTG. Somebody needs to check her and a few others that's in there that think they can just do that. Regardless of party. It's just a matter of respect. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree, it's a matter of respect. And we've gotten to the point now where folks think respect does not matter.
Exactly. Yeah, you see, it's a slow drip from the faucet. It's a slow drip, and then sooner or later, that drip starts to turn into an actual flow. There was a time where you never heard any outbursts during the State of the Union from the President of the United States. And it's been slowly creeping in. But that was just outright disrespectful, vile, disgusting, embarrassing. Because you have people around the world watching.
Correct.
This is not Britain where, they've been doing that for a long time, but this is not Britain. So, but that's my answer, Mark. And I stand on it. It's accountability. And, I've seen many, many people go in the wrong direction. I would not correct in public. That's not how I operate as a leader. But I would pull them to the side. Sometimes they didn't know, they weren't aware. Sometimes they would say, well, nobody ever told me. And I say, well, I'm sharing it with you now. And in other cases, they looked at it more of a reprimand than it was intended to help them improve and to get better. And I had to help them to understand why behind the fact that I'm holding you accountable. I want you to understand why. And I've seen some people turn around, and years later, we're thankful.
Right.
And other people, when you hold them accountable, they get resentful and they get defensive, and we just have to deal with it. So it does take an element of boldness and courage, but as a leader, it's something that we have to do, and that's part of the curriculum. Anytime we're teaching any of the leadership sessions that we do, or if I'm giving a keynote on that particular topic, I always remind leaders that part of your charge, part of your responsibility is foundational to who we are as leaders, is that you have to hold people accountable. But I don't want you to think about that word in terms of it being negative.
Correct.
Because it also means keeping people inspired and encouraged and motivated to continue to do a good job, those that are, so they never feel like they're being taken for granted.
I know that's right. Well, I'll tell you what, listening audience, I honestly desire and hope that you've been with me since 6 o'clock. But truly, if you didn't join me at 6, I truly hope you've been with me since 7, because my guest this morning is Kevin Wayne Johnson. He's the founder and chief executive officer of the Johnson Leadership Group, as well as a pastor. And we're talking this morning about leadership. And interestingly enough, your book is Leading in Your Workplace. And you just said something kind of like leads me right into my next question. Leading in your workplace, leading with a servant's heart. Now, someone could look at that and think servant's heart means soft. And I just heard you say about courage. I just heard you say about, having to, really kind of like be bold. But now somebody could look at that servant's heart thing and think, oh, well, that's just somebody being soft.
Yeah, we get that a lot as well. So here we go again. I have to unpack it. I have to help people to understand. So leaders are not doormats. So there's no expectation that any leader would allow anybody to walk over them. When I talk about the heart, I also go back to what's happening with the mind. And leadership with a servant's heart, the spirit of the book, and you see it unpacked in all of the pages from chapter 1 all the way through chapter 9, and also all of the study questions as well. It's all about helping leaders to understand that it's much more than bringing your acumen and your intelligence and your subject matter expertise to what you do. Yeah, that gives us credibility because people want to know and see that their leader knows what they're doing and understands what they're doing. And so that gives us credibility when you do have subject matter expertise and you do have the acumen and you have the intelligence. So let's check that box. But we're not just dealing with workers. We're dealing with people. This is the relationship business because all 8+ billion of us on the planet are created to be relational. Everyone craves to be in a good relationship. Everybody wants to know that they are affirmed. Everybody wants to know that when they show up, they'll be included, and everybody wants to be a part of a tribe. That's part of human behavior. That's how we're created. So when people show up to work, when people show up to church, when people wake up in the morning in their family, they want to know that they have a relationship with the people they're working with and with their leader. Not necessarily a friendship, but a relationship. Because, Mark, relationship is the precursor to trust. And once we build that trust, now we're at a point now where we can work together in harmony because the relationship has been established. So when we lead from the heart, what we're looking for leaders to do and understand, because we don't get this in school, is to align what's in our mind with what's in the heart. Because the scriptures in Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 23 reminds us to guard your heart with all diligence. From it flows the issues of life. And so this is where the respect, the honor, the care, the value, the empathy, compassion, and love comes from. It comes from the heart. And leaders can demonstrate those characteristics and attributes even in the workplace, even in the church, even in our family, and align it with our subject matter expertise, our acumen, and intelligence. And now we are on our way to being the great leaders that we are created to be. And we're helping people to be able to produce at a high level and also perform at a high level. And we can transition from directing people to do things to just asking people to do things because we have that relationship. And so that's how I explain it. That's the heart and spirit of the book. And I know there's other writers out here who have written on the subject, but I bring it more from my practical experience of doing it as a frontline, mid-level, and senior-level leader, both in the secular world and in ministry, because I've been actively engaged in ministry leadership now for 22 years, as a deacon, as an associate pastor, as a senior pastor, and as you read in the bio, doing work in the local church, but also having responsibilities at the regional level, national level, and international level. Been back and forth to Kenya, Africa, a number of different times. And so I've had a chance to actually experience it, not just go through a business school and get practical applications, but actually live it. And that's what we walk people through in the books. And we're about to launch a brand new online course that we're going to be distributing globally as well. And it's based on the first book, the subtitle, Through Personal Relationships. So that's going to be released later this month. I just reviewed the 16 different courses, and that's going to be released as well. As a matter of fact, I'll send you the trailer. I meant to send you the trailer in advance, but I'll send you the trailer after we finish this interview as well, just to share with your listening audience as well. So that's what we mean by the heart. Leaders can do that and not be doormats. Okay,
Thanks.
Leaders do not have to allow anybody to treat you that way.
You're absolutely right.
Stand firm in what you believe and what you're doing. And people already know that we have the authority based on the title and the position. We can spend less time trying to echo the fact that we're the boss, we're the supervisor. People already know that. Let's spend more time on building relationships, developing people, getting them resources they need, sending them to the right training so that they'll be prepared for their next step once they get promoted.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, there is, because you're focusing on, because folks in the listening audience, there are different types of leadership. Servant leadership, to me, is the best one. Now, that's my personal opinion. That's the Marc Medley opinion. But servant leadership is the one that I subscribe to and the one that I work with. In my school, we're what we call a restorative practices school, a restorative justice school. In other words, when an infraction occurs, all of the parties are to be made whole. And, whoever was the offender as well as the one who was offended and anybody else that's in it. But usually, it's been my experience, people immediately, because we're talking school setting, people immediately want to go to suspension. Like they feel like if you didn't suspend the child, nothing was done. Not realizing that in restorative practices is a lot more. Restorative practice is just like nonviolence. It is just, it's tougher to do. It's easy to suspend because I've been on both ends of the spectrum. I've been in the district where I've suspended the most kids in the entire school district. And I've also now been on the other end on the restorative practices side, whereas we do our best not to suspend, where everybody gets around and be able to, going back to what we were talking about, talk the issues out and make everyone whole. In other words, restore. When we hear servant leadership, because I said there are different types of leaderships, and you kind of hit at it whenever you said the one that, feels like they need to constantly remind people that they're the boss. You have folks who go into leadership because they believe or they think it's about being a dictator, or they think it's about somebody serving them. As a servant leader, the pyramid is upended. Because most of the time we think in terms of the hierarchy of the leader being at the top and all the followers and all the peons and everybody else is on the bottom. But in servant leadership, it's the other way around. As your leader, I'm trying to see, how do I serve you, who are my followers or my employees or my subordinates or what have you. So talk a little bit about, because I'm looking at the various titles here, or shall I say the sections of your chapters. How should we serve others? understanding generations, perception versus reality, how leaders inspire. And then part 2, we had frontline leaders want role models, mid-level leaders seek answers, senior level leaders require reinforcement. And then we have part 3, grow self, grow the team, grow the organization, and then we have the conclusion, so forth and so on. So again, kind of walk us through, and I know you've been doing that, but give us an idea of, as we talk about, like, how should we serve others?
Yeah, so serving others, Mark, to kind of start it out with, just to kind of echo just very briefly, serving others really has a lot to do with the leader opening up himself or herself to allow people to know us, and then we, in return, taking the time to get to know them. So in order to effectively serve others, we have to take the time to get to know who they are. And so I firmly believe that all of this starts with a conversation, just a friendly conversation. It starts small. We talked a little bit earlier about the little drip from the faucet that ultimately becomes more pressure and more water starts to come out. But when it comes to serving others, just kind of start out with, how you doing? How's the family? Those types of questions. People start to open up a little bit, and they start to discover that, hey, this person is friendly and approachable, and that's good. And then once we get to know them, then we kind of understand their gifts, their abilities, their talents, and then being able to serve them has a lot to do with putting them in the right position for them to be successful. Because nothing builds confidence more than a person being successful at what they do. That builds a great deal of confidence really, really quick. But as you know, it also can build to frustration and disappointment when we're in the wrong position. So one of the ways to keep people in the right position and serve them well is just to get to know them. It sounds really simple, and it sounds simple because it is. We need to talk more. We need to talk to each other more, build those bridges, and find common ground. And when we do that, now we're in a better position to serve other people. So leaders should open ourselves up so that people get to know us. And then at the same time, simultaneously, we take the effort to get to know them. Now we're on our way to developing relationships. We can find out what works best for them, put them in the right position for them to be successful, and then we're on our way. And that includes other things like the various assessment tools that individuals can take, like the DISC for personality and for behaviors, the emotional intelligence. We can do the leadership self-assessment or the leadership 360. There's a number of different tools that we have in our arsenal that kind of help people to come in alignment with who they are and help them to discover exactly what they're good at, because a lot of people just don't know. They're counting on us as the leader to get them into those right training programs and those leadership programs so they can be the best that they can be. And during that journey, just make sure that we make ourselves available as leaders for them to come to when they have questions, because people will have questions, and give them just enough room to build up that confidence and to build up that portfolio on the different assignments that they've been tasked to complete. And that's how we sort of unpack it there in the book, because it starts with really having a conversation, getting to know them, and them getting to know us.
It's interesting you said that, because I have a very close friend who we were talking, and she was sharing me how she has two supervisors. One that comes in the building, and when he leaves, she feels discouraged. And then she has another one that when he comes in the building, she feels encouraged. And it came to mind when you just said about nothing builds success for when someone feels like they're succeeding. So it's interesting in terms of how, if you're in the leadership role, how just your commentary or your body language or facial expression or whatever can send messages of you feel I'm doing a good job, or either you're insinuating or it feels as if you don't feel I'm doing a good job, versus somebody that come in who is an encourager, that comes in and say, I see what's going on here and I thought so forth and so on, but you know what? Keep it up. Keep going down this path, whatever. That's critical as well in terms of being in a leadership role, as well as when you were talking about getting to know. It's really something to be able to get in on a personal level of what's going on. I mean, I'm not saying everybody have to tell all their business, but in terms of just being able to ask, you know what, I know you were sick last week. How you doing? I know you had this. How are you? And, we just came out of this whole COVID season where folks were getting sick on and off. So just to be able to check in on folks and see how you feeling. I'm worried about what you have to come in and do for your job, but how are you feeling? We have that going on, as well as I'm looking here in the next session where he says your leaders, they also want role models. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so we're always looking for men and women that are around us as it relates to their mannerism, their behavior. We're checking out their grooming. We're checking out how easy they make things look because they're in their lane. They're doing their thing. And a role model is really an example to follow. And I used to always select my mentors based upon how they were modeling where I wanted to be one day. So as a young pup, I'm looking at a man or a woman, not necessarily someone who looks like me, but someone who has already been advanced into a position or maybe a role or an area of responsibility that I know maybe in 10 years I would like to aspire to, and they're already there. And I'll reach out to them. I'm watching them in public. I'm watching how they carry themselves. I'm watching how they talk to people. I'm listening at how they deliver their presentation up on the stage behind the podium with a microphone in their hand. I'm looking at their grooming. I'm looking at how they dress. I'm paying attention to their reputation. And what they're doing is they are modeling what it takes to get to that level one day. And so we are role models and examples, leaders, but guess what? We too are also looking for others who are role modeling and leading and being an example for what we want to do one day. And it really never stops. I mean, even in this season of life, I often reflect on both men and women who are still here with us and those that have gone on to glory. And I will occasionally go to YouTube and I'll listen to General Colin Powell.
Correct.
Or I'll listen to the late, great Dr. Miles Monroe.
Right.
Or I'll pull up Zig Ziglar. And, these are examples of people that have gone to glory. Oh, not to mention the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That goes without saying.
I mean, him and for me also, Evangelist Billy Graham. There's something about their voice that still resonates. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be in Atlanta next month as a part of the Black Authors Matter tour. We have a tour stop in Atlanta next month, and on Sunday I'm going to Ebenezer Baptist Church for Sunday service.
Yes. I do. When I go down there, I do the same. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. I just already decided it's on the calendar. But that's what we mean by role models, because we are looking for people that we can emulate and that we can mirror that meet all of those different standards. And what they're doing is they're demonstrating that even at that level, whatever level it might be, that they have ascended to, that they can still be professional, diplomatic, and tactful, and they don't have to be rude, divisive, and sarcastic. Not only to get there, but then once they are there. And that's the type of role model that I always look for, and that's the type of example that I always try as best I can to set for the generation coming behind me.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I have at least 3 mentors. It's probably a few more, but I know there's 3 right off the bat that I have no problem acknowledging. One of them, and I would not be in the principal seat or where I am today if it was not for Dr. Joseph S. Fulmore Sr. I have no problem with shouting that out. One of my other mentors is Dr. Michael Chiricello. Another mentor is Dr. Biggs, and then I have some. I'm like you in terms of like going back into those that have gone on that were big time. And it's also incumbent upon us, as you said, in terms of not only do we have role models, but we need to be role models for those who are looking up to us. One of the things, anytime I have a teacher or anybody in the building that says they're looking to move on or if they're getting promoted or whatever, I always tell them, I am not going to block you or to try to hold you back because no one has ever blocked me or held me back. Anytime it was time for me to get promoted or to move on, there was always somebody there for me to pull me over, and it is incumbent upon us to pull others over as well. One of my late fraternity brothers, Reverend Dr. Frederick Lagarde Sr., he would always say, you're not a success unless you've made a successor. So unless you have folks that you are now developing and making them into a success, I mean, in reality, according to his quote, you're not a success. So I always keep that in mind, and exactly what you're saying in terms of the role modeling as well as seeking out good role models.
Yeah, you're on point with that, Mark. And like I said, it never stops. It never ends. It's something that's ongoing, continuous. It's recurring. And again, either consciously or unconsciously, you and I are role models. We are examples. People are looking to us.
Correct.
And that's just the reality of it. And so we need to be extra careful to make sure that we're setting that good example because people are watching.
Correct.
Here's what's really interesting about it. Most people won't really say anything. They're just kind of observing.
Correct.
They're just kind of watching. Most people don't say anything, but that doesn't minimize or decrease the fact that we still need to be vigilant about who we are and what we're doing, and recognize how we represent ourselves as leaders.
That is correct. That's why I have never, ever agreed with Charles Barkley when he made that statement, we are not role models. Like, what do you mean you're not role model? I mean, when he made that statement, he was off base with that. When he says we're not role, like the fact that you're in the limelight, you're in the spotlight, you're in front of that many people all the time, whether you want to be or not is different. But you can't say that you're not because whatever you like you said, folk, you are. So there's no getting around that, particularly whenever you're in public roles like that where people can see you. And they see what you do or don't do or so forth and so on. And then the last piece I'm going to touch on before I get ready to let you go is the whole notion of growing self. And that gets back to the quote that I read from you in the beginning of the book, because a lot of folks think they get to a point where they've arrived and they don't have to do any more. Now, for years, folks have been challenging me to go back and get the doctorate, and I've been putting it off. So finally I just said, okay, you know what? I think I am ready to take on that challenge. And partly because I could care less if anybody call me doctor or not, but it goes back to that whole thing of what you're talking about, the love of learning and wanting to know more, learn more, and be able to do more based on the fact that you know more. So that's kind of like I had to write an essay in order to the selection committee whenever I was applying. And, I put in there, I care less about being called doctor, but I do care about being a lifelong learner. And I also put in there what we were just talking about in terms of being a role model. I am the principal of a single gender school, which is for the most part African American and Hispanic males. And one of the things I put in the essay was I wanted them to see that even at my age, even I'm their principal, that even I'm willing to go back to school. So if your principal can be in school, if someone who's 60 years old can go to school, certainly you as a 12-year-old ought to be able to go to school. So I talked in that essay about me being a role model for my students. That's one of the reasons I'm going back. But talk a little bit about, how important is it for you not to get to the point where you feel like you've arrived?
It's crucial. It's crucial. I say two things. Leaders are learners, and I also share that leaders are readers. And one of the things that I do is I just remind people that because everything around us changes so frequently, just take a look at technology, right? It's upgrade, it's changed, it gets revised, and changes are always going on around us. And being a good learner is really, really key to who we are and what we represent. And so having that thirst that's never quenched and having that hunger that's never satisfied is really key. So I just throw out a little challenge for people. Some people are already doing it. Others think it's impossible, but I let them know that it's not impossible. It's doable. If I can do it, you can do it. And that is to read a book a month.
I know that's right.
if you read a book a month, then you would have read 12 books throughout the year. But guess what? Books come in all different sizes. So it's not necessarily a 300-page 6x9 dimension book. You can choose a book like Who Moved My Cheese.
Right.
You can read that book in 30 minutes.
Right. That's right.
And you have read a book. That's your book for the month, right? So I tell people that when I travel, I read on the airplane, and depending on where I'm going, my home base is Baltimore, so I fly out of BWI. Depending on where I'm going, if the flight is 2 to 3 hours, depending on the book that I'm reading, I'm already halfway through it before I land.
Correct.
And that's just one way. So
that's correct.
So people can definitely do it. And what I do is usually when I give these presentations, I bring different books with me, and I give different examples of the books that I read. Some are very thick, some are very thin, some are hardback, some are softback. And some even have the little spiral. It looks like a little notebook, but it's a book because it has an ISBN.
Correct.
And I say these are examples of books. These all meet the definition of books, and you can definitely read one of these a month. It just keeps your mind sharp.
Yes.
Thinking, keeps your innovation and your ingenuity and your creativity at the forefront, which is what's needed for all leaders. So, there you have it. That's why I say that leaders are readers and leaders are learners.
I tell you what, I like that. I'm going to put that on Facebook, too. I'll quote you on it about that challenge of read one book a month. Now, I have all my books downloaded on Kindle, and at any given time, I'm between 25 to 30 books at any given time. And like you, it's like I'll read an hour in this book, I'll read an hour in that book, I'll read an hour in this book, or either a half hour, whatever. And people, whenever I make that statement, people look at me like I have three heads. And I said, and the example I always use is, well, okay, let's say you sat down now and you watched 5 or 6 half-hour sitcoms. You got 2 sitcoms an hour, and if you watch to like 4 of them, that's 2 hours. If you watch 6 of them, that's 3 hours, so forth and so on. So the same way you could sit down and watch, Everybody Loved Chris on a binge, or whatever you're gonna watch, is the same way I read. And so never thought about it that way. So the fact that you just said, I'm gonna throw out a challenge in terms of like one, but I said that would be a real easy challenge for me. I can do it because the average person, they did the research, don't read one book a year. So to get to 12, if you did it the way that you just prescribed, at least they would get to 12. And, for somebody like me, I read 20, 30, 40 books a year. But the last thing, I thought the other one was going to be the last thing, but I'm going to be like you all preachers now in terms of saying, I'm really done this time. Really, the last thing I am going to say, and I'm teasing you, in terms of, I had a guest one time. She came on the show and she says, I am so proud to be on this show and to be with you because all we hear are black men not doing anything. And she says, the fact that you've been on the air for almost 23 years, that I'm on this show with you, debunks that myth. And since we are in Black History Month, and since you are an African-American male, just like I'm an African-American male, in terms of, we were talking about role modeling and representing. In terms of being a black male doing the Johnson Leadership Group, LLC, so forth and so on, what statement is that making about in terms of what black men do and don't do? I have to give that one some thought.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter, Mark, of being laser focused on who we are and what we are responsible to be doing.
Correct.
But it also has a lot to do, like I said earlier when we started, we live in a world where everyone's looking for hope and for direction. And even the scripture describes us as sheep.
Yes.
It means we need a shepherd. We need a leader in our lives. And so part of our call, part of our charge, like what you do with the radio station and you're reaching so many people, is to give people information. From that information, now they can make intelligent choices. And what's happened in our world that we live in right now is because of the advances with technology, I think we actually have too many choices, and it's causing a lot of confusion and distraction. But when it comes to black men, in terms of who we are and what we do, helping each other, building those relationships, getting access to information is the key. And then once we get in alignment with exactly what we're here for, what our purpose is to get involved. And that is to help each other to get involved. Now, I believe that it starts in the home. So
I know that's right.
Gail and I, from our union, we have 3 sons. They're all back to back to back. All my buddies call me Fred McMurray, my 3 sons. And then the youngest son is autistic, so he's still here with me, and the oldest 2 have left the nest. But we told these guys from day one, listen, man, I want you to represent yourself well.
Right.
I want you to be a good American.
Right.
And I want you to be a great husband and a great father.
Right.
Grow up just by watching what I do. Watch how I treat your mom. Watch how I talk to your mom. And I want your way of thanking me is to go out and do the same thing. So it starts in the home. And then I want you to go out and have a conversation with people in your circle who maybe grew up without a father.
Right.
And share with them your relationship with your father, some things that we've done, some things we talked about to help them on the journey. And I'm going to tell you right now, Mark, I'll end with this. When you and I go out of our way to serve other people, that's where the real fulfillment in life comes from.
Correct.
You are not going to be a fulfilled person if it's all about you. You've got to serve other people because that's where the joy, that's where the fulfillment comes, and I believe that's how God created us. It's not about us. We're blessed to be a blessing. And so if we can grab a hold of that, and that's what leadership is all about, and that's why the book is titled Leading from a Servant's Heart, because when we do that, we're fulfilled, and those that are under our leadership are also fulfilled because they're getting what they need. So, yeah, that's it right there in a nutshell. I
hear you. Well, man, it was good talking to you again, and this is what I do the last few minutes of the interview, and this is how we close out. I give you the opportunity to promote. You can say anything, shout out anybody, anything you want to say with the exception of a dollar amount. But in terms of contact, websites, sharing more about the Johnson Leadership Group or anything, with the exception of a dollar amount, I'm going to shut the microphone off, and you have this opportunity to promote.
All right. Well, we thank you so much. So we are now up to book number 2 in the Leadership with a Servant's Heart series. We're so grateful. We're so proud of it. The name of the company is the Johnson Leadership Group, LLC. Our website is thejohnsonleadershipgroup.com, thejohnsonleadershipgroup.com. We provide leadership development training, executive coaching, diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Also a certified coach, mentor, and speaker on the topic of leadership. Love what we do. The email address is Kevin at the Johnson Leadership Group, and we're based in Clarksville, Maryland, so we're about halfway between our nation's capital and the city of Baltimore. So, Mark, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and looking forward to coming to your city soon because we are in the midst of our national book tour, started in December of 22. We're on a book tour all the way through December of 23, 20 U.S. cities, and then we're going to be in Kenya, Africa in September, and we'll be in Dubai in November. And as a matter of fact, right after this interview, I'm on my way down to D.C. because we have a big event today with the Black Authors Matter Tour. There are about maybe 30 or 40 African-American authors from all over the country that will be in our nation's capital today. We'll be doing meeting and greeting and panel discussions and signing books and hugging on people and kissing babies.
I know that's right. Well, I'll tell you what, any of the authors you meet down there that you think want to be on this show, please let them know that you know this guy in New Jersey that has a radio show for authors. Pass me along to them, because I'm always looking for great guests. So if you're going to be down there in that circle of influence, let them know, what you did this morning, and you all can be a part of it too. They can go to my website, marcamedley.com, and all the contact information is there if they want to be a part of the show in 2023.
All right, my man. It sounds really, really like a plan. I value our friendship. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And God bless you and all of your wonderful listeners as well.
Thank you. Same to you, man. Have a blessed day and safe travels throughout the year as you go on the book tour. And best, again, God's blessings to you and your family.
All right. All right. We'll see you soon.
All right. Take care now.